Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Books Live. Tonight we have Angela M. Sanders with us. She has a brand new book coming out tomorrow. We're very excited. She was in the store today signing copies. So if you ordered a signed copy, it's on its way. I believe tomorrow they'll go out in the mail. So we're very excited about it. So we're just going to jump right in. I'm very curious about tell me a little bit about this particular book, maybe a little bit about the story without giving too much away. So those who aren't familiar with the story, who haven't been able to read flap copy yet, get a little bit of an idea of where this adventure is going.
Well, in each of, so this is the third in the series. I'll just show you briefly in case you can see. So there's Bait and Witch. We got some 7-Year Witch right here. And then this one is Witch and Famous. So in the first book, Josie, who is our witch librarian, discovers she's a witch. She has no idea. And the second one, but at the end of the book, her mom sends her a trunk of lessons from her sealed up magic lessons from her grandmother, because she doesn't have any other mentor. Her grandmother's dead. Her mom had forced her grandma to keep her magic under wraps. So in each second and third book, fourth book, I already turned in the manuscript for that. From each of the books, I want each one to feature a different magic lesson. And I actually have a consulting witch here in Portland, and she's great. Her name's Pomegranate Doyle. She teaches at the Blue Iris School of Mystery. And so the magic lesson for Witch and Famous is love spells. And it turns out to be really interesting. I mean, is it an ethical thing to put a love spell on someone? And what's the difference between a love spell, between love, being in love, and glamour, or attracting love and glamour? And which has glamour has its own sort of technical thing that goes with it. So this one revolves around love spells. And I'll just give you just a little hint to tell you there's a cat in this book, and there's a chance that the cat might get into a love potion at some point, maybe. But you'll have to read the book. But so in this one, Josie's assistant librarian, Roz, also writes romance novels as Eliza Chatterley Windsor. And one of her romance novels was picked up by a big movie star, think like Reese Witherspoon, except not Reese Witherspoon, for her televised book club. So the movie star and her crew is coming to Podunk, Wilfred, to film an interview with Roz about her book, which is called The Whippoorwill Cries Love. And then when the movie star shows up, all hell breaks loose, and of course some people die. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
They kind of have to.
There's right, exactly. And there's love spells, there's love potions, there's a lot of thinking about love, hopefully in some interesting ways too.
So what were the magic lessons in the first two?
Okay, so the first one, she doesn't figure out she's a witch until halfway through the book. And so it's really just about, oh, wow, I'm a witch. What kind of power do I have? What can I do? Where does my magic come from? And the whole idea with Josie, because so I got the assignment to write this. I'd never planned to write a series about witches. But my agent, who's always fishing around to, sell a series and get his 15%, he's pretty good at it, which is why he's a good agent, called me up and was like, Angela, I got an idea for you. So he called up the editors at various publishing houses and the editor-in-chief at Kensington. He called them up and said, what are you looking for? So editor-in-chief at Kensington said, I want a series about a librarian who's a witch and she's got her magic cat, and they solve murders. So he called me up and he said, I got this idea, witch, librarian, magic cat, solves murders. So I said, well, does the cat have to talk? And he said, no, the cat doesn't have to talk. And then I thought, I'm not going to write about a witch librarian. I don't know anything about writing about witches. I'm too good for that. This is really stupid. And so, but I didn't want to tell him that right away. So I said, I'll give you a call in a week. During that week, I started thinking about it, and I thought, I totally want to write this. This sounds great. So, of course, I'm not too good, but that's stupid. So I wrote a proposal. What you do at that point then is write a proposal, and there might have been a number of people writing proposals. I don't know, probably not. Probably my agent was on this. And the proposals is, you know, the book up until the first murder, sort of the outline, what the series might be about, the community, stuff like that. And he sent it to Kensington and they accepted it. So then I had to think about, well, what do I want? What do I want this witch to do? I don't want her to be able to just go, poof, you know, you're a frog or whatever, because she could also then say, hey, I read your mind, you're the murderer, poof, you're in jail, you know, and that kind of takes away the fun of it. Yeah. So I thought, well, what could I make this magic so it's like on the edge of being real? And there was a bookstore, it closed down with the pandemic, called Another Read Through Books, and they had a staircase that went upstairs, and on one of the treads there was a quote from Alice. Let's see, I think I can read it to you exactly in here. Let's put on the old lunettes here. Mm-hmm. Alice Hoffman, books may well be the only true magic. And I thought, you know, she's a librarian. Books may well be the only true magic. So I decided to make a magic system that revolved around books. If you think about it, of course, an author puts a ton of energy into a book, writing a book, dreaming about the world. You start to see these movies in your head. You hear people talking to you. But readers also put a ton of energy into books, because then the reader takes these little black marks on a page and creates a whole world in their head. And it's going to build on whatever it was the author said. There's going to be all of that energy going in. Your idea of what Josie looks like probably isn't exactly my idea, or what Wilfred is like, or how she talks, or things like that. So I thought, what if all of that energy was the source of Josie's power? So I sort of ran with that idea. And in the beginning, I was trying to figure out what a magic system could be. So I kept it pretty simple, that books talk to her, basically. And then at the end, her grandmother put a spell on her because her mother basically forced her to. The spell breaks. And the grandmother, though, because she was also a really powerful witch, understood at some point Josie might need some sort of mentorship. So she wrote all these lessons. So the lessons, she receives the book at the very end of book, or receives the trunk of lessons at the end of book 1. And then in book 2, she gets her first lesson, which is, I wrote these books a long time ago.
I understand.
What is it? This is crazy. I remember Bait and Witch was love lessons. Let's see. 7-Year Witch. Curses. It was about curses. And then when I was talking to my consulting witch, I said, tell me about curses. What about curses? She showed me a lot of really interesting things about curses, which I put into the magic lesson. But she said, sometimes you can be dealing with a land spirit and not a curse. So I worked in this idea of a land spirit, which was a fascinating idea, that there is a spirit that sort of determines the energy of an area. Like, apparently New Orleans has sort of a famous land spirit that can really screw you up. It can really stir up creativity, but it can also stir up addiction and madness. And, Paris has a really nice land spirit that encourages love and beauty. And so there's sort of the interesting idea of a land spirit, and a land spirit being angry, and what do you do with a land spirit? So in 7-Year Witch, book number 2, she gets to talk to a snake, and there's some land spirit stuff. Then book number 3 is a love lesson. And then the one that I just turned in is a really fundamental lesson that book will be out in June. Really fundamental lesson for witches, which is how to mind your own business. Sounds pretty basic, but it can get you a lot of trouble. And then the book I'm just going to start, I think the lesson is going to be about lying, truth and lies. When do you lie? When you tell the truth.
Interesting. That's really fun. I love that. I love the system and I
think
books being the source of that,
yeah, right. And I think that the best novels, for me at least, are the ones that make me feel something, where I'm going like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? But also like, also the ones that leave me with a little something to think about later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love the idea of this books being the source of her magic. I mean, I know I walk through the aisles at the bookstore, especially in the morning when nobody's here and the lights are turned off still, and you just kind of think about, like, you know, every single book on that shelf, somebody had to take the time to come up with what was in it and write all the words that are in it. And then, you know, we have hundreds of books on the shelves, and somebody's
world for a year, more years. And that book has touched, you know, thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of lives.
Exactly.
And it's entered into their worlds. It's really interesting if you think about it. Just the library, standing in the library and looking around at the stories, the knowledge, the emotion, all there. It's yeah, I love it. But you know, I love books too.
So I want to jump back out of Josie's story for a little bit. We'll get back to it in a little bit, but I'm really curious because I was on your website earlier and reading your, you know, your little about me page.
I know, which
you have a really interesting journey to writing. And I wonder if you could share that a little bit for folks who haven't maybe seen the bio page or that kind of thing.
Yeah, you know, I think I grew up pretty much in poverty in rural Northern California. And I was the first woman in my family, both sides of the family, ever to go to college, and the first person to have a graduate degree, because I have a couple uncles who have college degrees. But basically, that's just not something my family did. So I thought, what I need to do here is be responsible. Well, I got my hands sometime in my teens. I got my hands on a teen magazine, and then 17. And whoa, that blew my world apart from my little trailer in the woods. It's like there's people live doing all kinds of amazing things, not just clipping up their hair on one side with a nice barrette. You can tell this is a long time ago. But also just living these amazing lives. And I had a gigantic imagination, and I loved books, of course, and I wrote lots of stories. But I wasn't going to do that. I remember my grandma, who is, the person that I truly loved most in the world. She's long dead now, but she said, well, you're going to be a writer, aren't you? I mean, sometime when I was just like a little kid, but so that sticks in my head. But I didn't, of course. I went to college. I went to the University of Washington, got myself a bachelor's degree, master's in public administration, concentration on foreign policy. And I thought, I'm going to do something responsible and get a job with the government. So now, just as an aside, I'm going back to the University of Washington bookstore next month to do a reading. And it cracks me up so much. Like, if I could go back to myself, like studying economics, public administration, and say, you're coming back here, you're going to read this bookstore about a witch librarian and her magic cat, I would have said, you're on drugs, because that's not happening. But it's like, so then I got this job with the federal government, and I traveled all around the world. I testified in front of Congress numerous times, all this stuff. But I wasn't happy. I was getting promoted. I was making good money, but I wasn't happy. This wasn't life. So at a certain point, I started to edge away from it. I looped myself onto the grease pole to poverty by, leaving the government, first working for an art college, working for other nonprofits, then doing freelance work, and started writing, first doing magazine writing, and then writing fiction. And I got to the point, it's like I had to do all the things to prove that I could do the traditional things to survive and be successful before I could give it all up for the bohemian lifestyle of poverty, witch librarians. And I'm so happy now. It's just like, this is really what I meant to do. Okay. And with that, I'm going to fan myself because it is so dang hot here and no air conditioning.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Yeah. So why mysteries? What got you in that end of things?
Well, to me, it just seemed obvious. Well, okay, no. Let me say that it's obvious to me now. It didn't. Initially, I thought, I want to write a novel. And I remember I was working for a nonprofit, National Crime Victim Law Institute, and I was talking to one of the attorneys there, and I said, I'm wondering what I should do. I could write something literary. And because I'm thinking that's what you should do, right? Because literary is where it's at. That's what's respected. That's where you're cool. or I could just write a mystery and I would have more fun, probably, and make more money. And he looked at me like, are you crazy? You know, isn't it pretty clear what you should do? You would write the mysteries. And so once I got sort of past that ego thing of, you know, well, shouldn't I be, you know, I make, well, I shouldn't, I won't say this. This is going on YouTube. God knows who will watch it later. So I won't go into my own prejudices. But I got over this idea that I had to be literary or had to, I mean, my goal is to write high quality entertainment. I want somebody to pick up the book, to read it through and say, that was a really good story. And I felt relaxed and absorbed, and I like the writing, I like the characters, and I want to read another one of these. And that's my goal. That makes me, whenever I hear from a reader who said that they enjoyed my book, I am so happy, because like I met my goal. So.
Yeah, no, I get the subtext there. Because I do nonfiction for kids and do work for hire. Like, you're very aware that there is a hierarchy in writing, and that, you know, like literary fiction, adult literary fiction kind of gets put on the top of that pedestal. And I think there's that sort of underlying feeling that maybe I should try to be doing that, but then you realize that maybe I don't want to do that. And so, right.
Maybe I'm going to be driven by what I want instead of what they want. I mean, it's true even within the crime world. And I once had a Twitter exchange with Val McDermott, and I tell this story all the time. Fearful, I think it's funny, but she had sent out on Twitter, and I haven't been on Twitter for a cajillion years, so don't try to find me there. She put out, she said, I'm looking for, I've got to speak at this, whatever, something about crime fiction. Do you have any topic ideas? And I replied, yeah, let's talk about the hierarchies in the crime fiction world, because there's like the literary mysteries and then the noir mysteries, you know, they all, and if you go to crime conferences, they kind of sit in their own little areas. And then, you know, traditional mysteries, and we have the cozies, and the very bottom, we have the cozies with the cats. And her response, and the cats look down upon us all. I thought that was kind of perfect.
That is cute. Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate, honestly, because it's like, I think, I think the romance novelists also kind of get, poo-pooed too. And I think, the amount of effort that it takes to write a book, regardless of the genre that you're writing in, is significant. And it doesn't
totally
it takes skill to write in each genre. And if you can be good at one genre and be terrible, like you could be an amazing literary fiction writer and not be able to write a romance novel to save your life. So, there is skill in each area, and I would like to see it respected as such, rather than this sort of unwritten, this is better than this, or anything like that.
I think that there's it, and I don't know how much your audience wants to hear about writing versus the stories, but I have learned that there is a difference in skill level in writing and in storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's why you can be kind of not a great writer, but you can tell an amazing story, which is where, people always say, they always point to Dan Brown as an example, kind of not a great writer, but a great storyteller. Yeah. And I think there are some literary writers who suffer from beautiful sentences and stories that just, you put down the book, there's no reason to pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I also noticed that this is your 4th series. So tell me a little bit about the other series, just in case everybody's like, they get through the next, Witch and Famous and go, hey, I need something before next June.
Well, the first series I wrote was the Vintage Clothing series, featuring Joanna Hayworth. The first book I ever wrote was A Lot of My Murders. Of course, it took me, when I decided to write a mystery, I thought, I've been writing professionally for a while. How long is this going to take? 3 months? That was ridiculous. So it was like, later, I finished that first book. And because it's not fiction and nonfiction are not the same. And so I got an agent, and the agent was just really poking around with it. I think in 2 years, she submitted it to 2 places. And so then I fired the agent and I thought, I'm going to self-publish this. And it, it went, it's an Amazon top 10 hot new release. And I was able to get dental work done, bought a washing machine, made some good money off of that.
That's awesome.
So then I sort of ran with that series. And then a friend called Kate Dyer-Seeley, who writes this L.A. Alexander, and her, and she said, oh, my agent's looking for somebody. He was out there, prospecting for work, and one of the houses got an idea they want to do a house series featuring a kite shop. And a house series is something where the publisher themselves decide to, it's kind of like Nancy Drew with Carolyn King. Carolyn King's been like 40 people or whatever. They have an idea. And so one of their assistant editors came up with an idea for a kite shop on the coast mysteries, and was asking for proposals. So I submitted a proposal through my friend's agent, and they accepted it. So then he became my new agent. I was wary. I didn't know if I wanted to do something traditionally published. I thought, oh, this will be a good experience. I'll get developmental editor and all this stuff. I had 5 editors for 3 books because Berkeley was going berserk. There's a lot of churn then. I think it's stabilized quite a bit now. And but then that got me started. So then I also wrote, my very favorite books are the Booster Club Capers. There's only 2 of them. I have an idea for a 3rd one. It's 3 points of view. It centers around a retirement home for petty criminals. But they do. I know.
I like
Isn't
that.
A brilliant idea? Cat in the Bag is my favorite. That's the 2nd one. I have an idea for a 3rd one called The Hat Trick, but I just have to find the time to write it. But it's fun, and they're crafty because you have to take 3 storylines and then weave them together, and there's one giant caper.
That's
and
very
it was fun. The characters were great. I had a really good time with those. So there's only 2 books in that series. The one that was the Kite Shop one I wrote as Clover Tate. There are 3 books in that series, and that just never got traction. And then we got Witch Librarian. I'm contracted through 6 books. I've written the 4th. I'm starting the 5th.
That's very cool.
And it seems to be doing
well. More of her. That's good.
Yeah, Josephine Way. The only reason
back to Josie, and that series. I'm curious what how did you build the town? Because it is a fictional town, but it's in Oregon, so it's clearly based on local towns and local geography and that kind of stuff. So I'm curious about how that process worked for you.
I knew I wanted some mountainous place, and I knew I wanted something with some mountains and some farmland. So my friend Lelania and I named the trailer park psychic after her, Lelania Dolby. And so she grew up in Gaston, got in her car and drove to Gaston, which for people who don't know, that's sort of up against a coastal range, teeny tiny little farming town, but it's on the verge of wine country and the mountains. We drove out to Vernonia, where there was a big flood, a timber town, more in the mountains. And then I did some research on another smaller town, Cherry Grove. So I kind of made my own amalgam of those towns. And in my mind, there's a very clear map. And someday I want to convince the publisher to do a map. And I always love those maps.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So there's the mountains on one side. I mean, the beach is really just like 40 minutes away too.
Yeah.
Ocean.
So we have about 10 minutes left because we're on a 40-minute time limit, but I'm going to ask one more question, and then I want to open it up. If people who are watching, if you want to pop in now, you can type a question in the chat and I can read it out, whichever you prefer. We are still recording, so whatever you're most comfortable with. But I'm curious what mystery writers, writers in general too, but particularly mystery writers that you love and that kind of inspired you. I know you mentioned Nancy Drew in your bio, but
all the women say Nancy Drew. I know they do. It's like Nancy Drew was like a fundamental reading. But I love vintage crime novels. The golden age up through the early 60s are like my sweet spot. There are a lot of authors that are almost impossible to get in print, but if you really hunt hard enough, you can find them. Delano Ames, I love. Let's see if I can pull out a couple here. Okay, Alice, let's see, Phoebe Atwood Taylor, she wrote as Alice Tilton for some of the books. They are hilarious. They featured Leonidas Witherall, he writes for like a detective radio show, but he also like runs a boys' school, and he looks exactly like Shakespeare, so he always gets a lot of comments about that. Those are hilarious. Delano Ames, here's one old one, bottom page 1. He and his wife, who is a writer, Jane, she writes crime novels. They're always getting in trouble. And then the two sisters wrote, Constance and Gwyneth Little wrote a whole series, The Black Blank, that are just these humorous, hilarious 30s, 40s, 50s crime novels. I really enjoy those. Helen McCloy, she's really great for doing descriptions of outfits. So she'll write about a scene in 1957 in a cocktail party, and you see the dresses, the hats, the gloves, everything. I love that.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And then modern writers, I just gotten, when I was down at Vintage Books this morning, I got the latest Ruth Ware. I really enjoy her. There's I can't even, yeah. It basically, if it falls.
Oh, that's a great list. That's fun. Let's see. KG says, I love the witch books that you are writing now, but my favorite is the Joanna Haywood books because I love the fashion. And she wanted to know if you were writing any more of those in the future.
You know, I have one plotted out called Mode of Death. It takes place at Théâtre La Mode. And there is the famous yodeling rapper. I can't remember his name now. I have it all. The book is all plotted out. I even went out to the Mary Hill Museum to do the research, and I just haven't had time to really get going on that. But there is one more. I also have to figure out what's happening between Joanna and her husband. You know, if they're going to break up, I have to figure that out. But yeah, it's not stopped. And what I love about those books is I love the aesthetic part. I love writing about the martinis, the dresses, the perfume, all that stuff. So I'm trying to get Josie more into that. I'm trying to lead her that way so that I can write about that stuff more.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anybody else have any questions?
You can ask.
It's Karen. I saw that Maureen. There's Karen and Maureen, and Karen is in Pennsylvania and Maureen is in San Francisco. And that is kind of amazing. That's pretty fun. Maureen says, where do you get help for like the library facts?
Well, I'm sure the librarians would probably flip out if they read my books. They'd be like, this is so not real. I mean, I'm not just talking about like the witch parts, the fact that a cat walks all around the library and stuff. But, you know,
it's a small town. It's fine.
It's all right. It's kind of like a very old fashioned. I got smart. I said the book that the library was really old fashioned. So there was a card catalog, but by book 2, they've modernized that. But I did talk to a librarian here, one who's sort of in charge of one of the little clumps of libraries in my part of town. And we had coffee together, but really, I kind of make a lot of it up.
Yeah. Well, I think as long as it doesn't take you out of as long as it's believable, I think it's probably fine.
You know, it's a weird thing. So I was like, in book 2, there's a scene where the cat has to go into a basement karaoke lounge, going through the vent, the big vents where the air comes in the furnace. So I was talking to my dad about like, okay, so does that vent go to outside? How can the cat get into the heater ducts? Because I won't tell you why if you haven't read that book. And so he finally said, look, you're writing about a witch. Why do you even care if the heater ducts are correct? You know, there's enough fiction going on.
Well, I think that there's a certain amount of, though, you have to get it believable enough that it doesn't throw someone out of the story thinking, wait a minute, that couldn't work. But I think as long as it's close enough, like you can suspend your disbelief, then it's all good. Maureen also asked, will we learn more about Josie's French heritage in future books?
You know, I think that, her father loves, so she has a lot of Scottish blood in her on her mom's side. Her father is super into French history. He teaches at the community college. So that's why she's named Josephine. Her oldest sister is Marie Antoinette. They call her Tony. Each of the sisters is named French queens. Her youngest sister is Eugenie, and they call her Jean. By the way, she features big in book 4, Jean Comes to Town. And she doesn't get murdered, but it's close. And I'll tell you that. So I don't know. I always tend to, I love France. I've been so lucky to go to France to do cat sitting for a bunch of years. And I love France. I really do. I'm going to be teaching a writing class there and cooking. I have to cook too to get to pay my way. But in fall of 2023 in Serres. So if anybody's interested.
Yay. Very fun.
I know. So I get to go there so I know I probably get in more French stuff than I kind of feel like I'm indulging myself, but maybe. Yeah.
And then we have time for one last question. We only have a couple of minutes left. Maureen also said, have you heard good love spell stories?
That is so I not really. I would love to hear some more though. The warning I got from the witch is you don't want to put a love spell on anybody because there's free will. You can put spells on yourself to say, make me more open to love or what stuff like that, but you don't want to bind anybody's free will because that's not what a smart witch does. I bet there's some good stories though of people.
Yeah.
Oh, like Alice Hoffman. She has some good love stories in her witch books.
Yeah.
What happens to people who love love spells.
And Karen says, thank you. It was great. It was really interesting to talk to a real author and hear how she thinks. I'm excited for your book tomorrow. So thank you, Karen. I hope it gets there quickly.
Thank you for tuning in so late. Sleep well. I hope your air AC is working well.
I hope it cools down for all of us. And I do need to end tonight. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could keep going for a bit, but I'm just about to run out of time. So thank you so much, Angela. Thank you, Maureen and Karen, for hanging out with us. This was really fun. And congratulations on the book. It's very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good night, everybody.
Good night.